welcome to one of the final sessions of Yoko Ono's Meltdown Festival here at Southbank. I'm Fiona Harvey. I'm the environment correspondent for The Guardian newspaper, and it's my pleasure and privilege today to introduce to you a fabulous panel who are going to talk about the future of energy. And it's something that is of vital importance to all of our futures. It's one of the biggest issues facing us today. It encompasses all sorts of things, from global warming, the future of the planet, the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the food that we eat. Everything that we do today in the modern world has energy as a fundamental part of it. So we expect this to be a very broad, wide-ranging discussion, and we've got a fantastic panel of experts and campaigners here for you. Before I go any further, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the context of the festival. You've probably been to some of the other sessions here, so you probably know some of this already. But this is the first time that a series of talks has been included in the festival as part of this Future Now weekend. And the festival's now in its 20th year, so that we hope that actually talks like this and discussions like this will become a core part of the programming in the future. These talks have all been programmed by Yoko and the Meltdown team, and they're about interrogating and exploring some of the ideas that Yoko is interested in. You may know that Yoko has campaigned, for instance, on the issue of fracking in the United States. So that's an issue that I think is probably going to come up as part of our discussion. As well as the core shows here, we've got various installations around the site that you may have seen, you might like to go and see later. We've got the telephone piece, we've got wish trees, we've got banners on the Royal Festival Hall and the Queen Elizabeth Hall. We've got sound installations all around the site, including apparently the toilets of the Royal Festival Hall. I haven't checked that out yet, but I think we all ought to. It sounds good. We've got a very special edition as well that I've been asked to tell you about, which is Crawl by Gustav Metzger, which is in the Sunley Pavilion. And if you're not sure where that is, there are people who can help you. We've also got the incredible music program that Yoko Ono has put together with the Southbank Centre Meltdown team. We've got a series of talks taking place. And the next session after this, just to let you know, is Alex Krotowski, who's talking about the future of the web. So that sounds like another fascinating one, because I've just said that energy is at the fundament of everything that we do in the modern world. Well, I think the internet is as well. So if you want to, on that note, if you want to tweet or do Facebook likes or anything like that while we have this talk, you're very welcome to, and I think some of the details are up here. You've got the hashtag and the Twitter details there. So, it's been an incredible year for energy in many ways. We have had the revolution that's been caused around the world by fracking. We've had the ongoing negotiations under the United Nations on bringing down greenhouse gas emissions in order to tackle global warming. And those negotiations are coming to a crunch point soon. We've had energy bill price rises for consumers in this country that has caused a lot of problems for fuel poverty for many people that I'm sure we're all very conscious of. In this country alone, our energy future has been called into question because the North Sea oil and gas reserves, which provided a boon to the economy for decades, are now running out, and we're looking at importing more of our energy. So that's the context in which we're asking these questions about the future of energy. So in that context, I'd like to introduce our panelists, and then I'm going to invite them each to say a few words, and then we're going to have an interactive discussion in which I hope you will all take part. So let me introduce, first of all, Vanessa Vine. Vanessa is a campaigner. She started off campaigning about fracking in her local area because she lives only 4 miles from the site of Quadrilla's proposed well in Balcombe in Sussex. She started up Britain and Ireland frack free, and I think that campaigning against this has largely taken over your life now, I think. Yeah. So you'll be able to talk to us a lot about grassroots campaigning and how people can get involved. So thank you for that. We've also got Professor Jim Watson. Jim is the Research Director for the UK Energy Research Council. That was started up just under a decade ago with the aim of providing an academic and research backing for the study of how we will do our energy in future. So great to have you here, Jim. And finally, we've got Natalie Bennett, an ex-colleague of mine, who's now the leader of the Green Party and based here in London, and actually contemplating whether to spend her summer holiday, which is only 2.5 weeks, writing a book about energy, or actually having a rest. Considering how much work you do, Natalie, I know you work tirelessly for the Green Party, so I do hope you get a rest in there. I'm going to start with you, Natalie. We're talking here about the future of energy. So give me your most important points on how you think we should see our energy future.
Okay, well, I wanted to begin, first of all, by thanking the audience for taking this not quite so sunny Sunday afternoon to come here and have this discussion. I don't know if you were outside earlier, but I was out having a whole lot of photos taken with some Green Party candidates, and I was experiencing for myself the rich wind energy resources that we have in the UK. So I guess the hair is still showing the effects of that, and we're getting firsthand some examples of the energy resources we have out there. And that, briefly, where should our future energy come from? That's one of the questions we started off being asked. And we have the renewable resources out there, the solar, the wind, onshore and offshore, in future the tidal, the local hydro. We have sufficient energy resources to meet our needs, with an important caveat that I'll come to in a second. But one of the important things we need to think a lot about is who owns those energy generating resources. And one of the important things that we need to think about is looking at community ownership of energy generation. I was down in Lewis recently. One of the sort of fun parts of my job means you get to inspect lots of things. So I got to climb onto the roof of the local brewery. I love heights. Climbing on the roof of the local brewery, where there's all these solar panels that are owned by the community. The money was raised by the community. The benefits are going back to the community from the ownership of those panels. And that's one of the things that I think we very much have to look towards, is community ownership of energy generation. If you're down in a village down in the valley, and some giant international energy giant comes along and says, we want to put an enormous wind farm up there on the hill, maybe people get upset. They feel like their landscape's changing, they're not getting any real benefit. But if the community themselves decide, we want to put a wind farm up there on the hill, and the benefits from that wind farm flow down the hill, the money comes down and maybe puts a new roof on the village hall, maybe puts some new facilities into the school, then that wind farm up on the hill just looks like a very different thing to if some giant international energy companies come along, planted the wind farm, swooped up the profits, whooshed them off out of the village, out of the UK, very often, all too often, into the nearest tax haven. Then what we've got is a very different kind of thing. So I think we need to look to renewable energy, and we need to look to community ownership of that renewable energy. What we don't need is nuclear or fracking. Now, I'm sure most people in this room are well aware of the many arguments against nuclear in terms of safety, in terms of the fact that we don't know how to dispose of the waste. But I actually don't need to go to those arguments anymore. I can simply go to the issue of cost. And the fact is that the government is looking at putting in a £40 billion subsidy for nuclear. £1 billion a year for 40 years.
They don't call it a subsidy. They say it's not a subsidy. But
yes, they don't. It is a subsidy. And that £40 billion, £1 billion a year will go onto our energy bills. Nuclear simply doesn't stack up on cost grounds. And that, we just can go to that argument without any others. There's also, of course, fracking. Now, Vanessa will be talking a lot about all the environmental issues around fracking, so I'll park those for the moment. But I'll also come back to the issue of cost. Now, most people in this room, I'm sure, are well aware that their energy bills have risen enormously in the past decade or so. nearly all of that energy rise, despite what you might read in the Daily Mail or the Express, is because of the rising price of gas. If we were to frack and to tie our energy future to relying heavily on gas, then we're going for a very expensive energy future, and that's not what we need. So I'm sure we'll discuss all of that a lot more, but there's the other important issue, which is the poor sister, which very, very often gets ignored, which is energy conservation. And that, sadly, is what is entirely missing from the government's energy bill at the moment. And what we need to do to make our energy a supply and needs balance in future is do a huge amount more of energy conservation. And if we think of the simplest form of energy conservation, we have some of the leakiest, hard-to-heat homes in the whole of Europe. Home insulation. You have a big government-funded program, and you create lots of jobs, and they're long-term, secure, good jobs, because there's a lot of homes to insulate. You tackle fuel poverty, you cut people's bills, and you cut carbon emissions. And at the moment, the government is not putting a single penny into home insulation schemes. We have the Green Deal, which you have the wonderful option of borrowing money from the bank at 6 or 7%. Very good for finance companies, very bad for getting homes insulated in Britain. So what we need to do is get really serious in terms of our energy future about energy conservation, and that's what we're absolutely not doing at the moment. So in short, to sum up in one sentence, we need to rely on renewables. We don't need, shouldn't have, can't afford nuclear and relying heavily on gas, and we have to conserve and not waste that valuable energy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much for those views, Natalie. We'll come back to some of those points later in the discussion, but thank you for setting them out there. Jim, you come from an academic background looking at analysing our energy needs and our energy generation, especially in the UK, but I know that you can take an international view as well. What do you think we need to do about our energy future?
Thank you very much, and again, also thanks for having me for the debate. I mean, I suppose I wanted to start, because I've got 2 or 3 points to make in this short introduction, with a reference to popular culture, since we're in the Southbank Centre. I mean, when people talk about the future of energy, particularly if you look at a lot of the fiction and films and so on, often somebody sometime has discovered this very free and abundant source of energy. Sometimes it's powering spaceships across the universe in a warp drive or whatever, or it's powering a car, as in Back to the Future. So a lot of sort of the energy debates that I get involved in, people will often say, well, here is a source of energy which is going to be very abundant, very low cost, and it's going to solve our problems for us. And that may well be the case. There may be breakthroughs, and there are likely to be breakthroughs, some of which people will like, and others which are more controversial. And perhaps even for the US, fracking falls into the more controversial category there. But my view on meeting what we need for our energy future is a lot of the technologies and measures we need already exist. The interesting thing about a lot of the energy technologies we use now, whether it's to produce energy or use it, are very, very old. A lot of them were invented not in the 20th century even, but in the 19th century. And it's taken a long time to develop them and make them commercially viable and low cost enough. I think my second point, given that, actually it's deploying what we have, making them lower cost, etc., is that we do have choices. I think what really irritates me in these debates sometimes is if somebody pops up and says, well, my technology is, I don't know, nuclear, or it's carbon capture and storage, or it's offshore wind, and it is the only way we can meet our policy goals. We have goals on carbon emissions, which are extremely important. The climate is changing, and if we don't do something soon, that will continue to get worse, and we will all suffer the consequences of that. We want secure energy supplies, as Fiona has alluded to in the introduction, and of course affordability is an issue. Our electricity prices have gone up, I think they've doubled since 2000 in our homes, and our gas prices have gone up by a factor of 3. So we've got to meet all those goals, but there isn't just one way of meeting them. So if you go to the government Department of Energy and Climate Change website, so one of the good things they've done recently is to put online something called the 2050 calculator. And you can invent your own energy future on there. and play around with lots of dials and buttons and invent your own way of meeting the climate targets and perhaps keeping the lights on as well at the same time if you're lucky. And if you look on that, for example, Friends of the Earth have gone on there and they've done their own energy future, and that's all about reducing demand. They, I think, are probably imagining a world where we wear more jumpers in winter because the average household temperature goes down slightly, so we're more comfortable with that. They don't want any nuclear, they don't want a lot of large-scale fossil generation, and a lot of renewables are in there. At the same time, alongside that, there's a future which is a big nuclear future, and it has 30 very large nuclear power stations, other technologies, less progress on energy efficiency. Now, I'm not saying one of those is better or worse, but I'm just saying that there are choices to make, and so it's better, I think, if we have that debate, and it is about social and political choice, not just self-evidently one way of meeting those goals is correct. There's a lot of argument in the evidence. And then my final and third point, given the profile of fracking and gas in this debate, is just to make a couple of remarks on that. I mean, natural gas is really important to the UK. 40% of the energy we use across the board comes from natural gas. Home heating in particular, hot water, industry, about 35–40% of our electricity comes from gas. And I think it's going to be with us for some time to come, the bridge to this low-carbon future. But in terms of fracking, I mean, again, I shall wait for Vanessa because she's more expert than I am on this, on many of the issues there. But my view is I don't think it's a bad thing per se, but actually it needs to be regulated properly, and I think it has been completely overhyped. The idea that in the UK will have the effect in the UK that it has in the United States is questionable. We don't know how much shale gas there is under our feet, and even if we did, we don't know how much of that is economically recoverable, the point that Natalie made too. Add to that issues of public protest and controversy, and you've got a recipe for a very uncertain future. So when George Osborne said in March in the budget, I want Britain to tap into new sources of low-cost energy like shale gas, he was making the assumption that it was going to be cheap, and I'm not sure there's enough evidence yet to make that assumption. So those are the points I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting points there, and I'm sure they will fuel the debate that we're going to have. Thank you very much indeed for that, Jim. Vanessa, I introduced you as a grassroots campaigner. Tell us why you're doing this and what you're interested in and how you see our energy future and why you feel so passionately about it.
Thank you. Thanks, Fiona. I'm very honoured to be here in this very ecologically intelligent company. I have no scientific background. I'm just a person who is passionate about what's right and about... I don't talk about the environment because once we talk about the environment as something separate, something's already gone wrong. I live 4 miles from Codrilla's Balcombe site. I've spent time in Lancashire with people who have been experiencing what's been going on up there, and the one thing that struck me most was a man who came and shook my hand, and I said, hi, I live close to Codrilla's site in Sussex, and he took my hand and he said, I'm sorry. And it was as if he was giving me condolences for a bereavement, and they had only been drilling, they hadn't even been fracking, and they'd gone over their permissions, they'd flouted all the regulations about overwintering birds. There are lots of details about the specific fracking violations that have happened, but initially, in my view, I will have to agree to differ with you on some things, because in my view, which is a lay view, fracked gas is not a bridging fuel. If we take all the unconventional methane, whether it's coal bed methane or shale gas, and even shale oil, out of the UK subterranean geology, we might keep the lights on 15, 20 years, and then what? We won't have invested in safe, renewable energy technologies that will give us real energy security and lasting employment. Fracking will not provide the jobs that several of our ministers are crowing about. It's specialised, it's brought in. The frack field workers are also at considerable risk. They're getting silicosis in their lungs in Pennsylvania. We've got the hindsight of the work that Yoko's been doing in New York and in the States of appalling damage. Google the list of the harmed in Pennsylvania. There's 1,400 more cases of people who are now speaking out about the damage, the health impacts to themselves, their children, their livestock. We've also got the hindsight particularly from Queensland in Australia with the CSG, which is coal bed methane here, which is already happening in Scotland. Our ministers, in my opinion, are negligent in sanctioning this. They're either ignorant or they're woefully ignoring the facts. And either way, that is negligent. The oil and gas industry is run by a small group of very powerful companies. It is not in the interests of the people and the ecology of this land to do this. There is far too much wrong with it. I believe that safe fracking is an oxymoron, as is responsible shale, as is eco-terrorist. What does it say about our culture that we've coined that phrase? From what I've learned, Jessica Ernst came to visit from Alberta. She's an oil and gas industry scientist of 30 years. She works for the industry. They fracked her land. She's now suing Encana, the company she worked for, and the Canadian government. She says that they have the best regulations in the world. Her bathwater burned her skin. She has to carry in her water. Her dog snarls and won't drink the water. They've destroyed her land. This industry is not the future for us here. I'm very concerned about the way the politicians are handling it. I sat in a debate in Parliament for 3 hours, which was actually about the badger cull, and I watched them completely ignore a petition of 250,000 people, all the science, David Attenborough, all of it. I have no faith anymore. I was brought up to trust our government. I no longer do. They're pushing this through, and it is not safe. Quadrillas specifically have proven themselves inept. They have had ministerial reprimand. They've been censured by the Advertising Standards Authority for lying to local residents. They're about to start doing this close to me. So what do? What do you do when a rig pulls into your village? In Balkan, where I live, it's a very quiet, sleepy area of outstanding attributee, conservative, rural parish. We've had tea parties opposite the rig. People are signing petitions. We have done a very powerful letter-writing campaign to the Environment Agency, who are now saying, oh, really? Quadrilla said that? Their main PR guy said to Greenpeace, I better not quote it exactly, but I realised that what I'm saying sounds like complete, utter bleeping bleep. That's their main PR person said that. They know they're lying. They know this is not safe. They know this isn't the future of energy. You cannot legislate for the vagaries of subterranean geology. I'm kind of presuming most people know what fracking involves, so not going into too much detail, but it risks contaminating our drinking water, our aquifers. You cannot clean an aquifer. It causes major air pollution. It does cause earthquakes. It wastes vast quantities of fresh water. It really is beyond belief to me that this is being sanctioned, and the industry itself, the gas wells leak. The Duke University study, the US Environmental Protection Agency, the evidence is all there. Our ministers are saying there's no evidence of harm. It's not true. It's not the future. We have to do this differently. And I've just learned this as a regular person who's let it take over her life. We all have to. Really, I exhort everyone in terms of you saying about liking Facebook pages. There are myriad ones. For this country, Britain and Ireland Frack Free, BIF, Facebook page, that's where we're doing stuff, Frack Free Sussex. If anybody has any ideas, 38 Degrees have now finally picked up on this, been working with them, but it's not enough. Petitions aren't going to do this. And everybody has to take initiatives and write to their authorities and take responsibility, because this is our wild ecology, it's our agriculture, and it's our future.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vanessa, for that very personal and heartfelt message there. Thank you for that. Personal and heartfelt, but of course encompasses huge issues that are going on around the world. I'd like to start leading this discussion now, because we've got an interesting variety of opinions here. I know there's a lot of common ground, but I'm sure there's an awful lot of nuances here in the different attitudes that the panellists are taking. And I'd like to ask, really, do we not need to stop burning fossil fuels immediately? And the reason I'm asking this is because the greenhouse gas emissions, the number of parts per million in the atmosphere of carbon has exceeded 400 for the first time in millions of years. That's a milestone that's just been passed earlier this year, according to the measuring instruments that we have. If we carried on and burned all of the hydrocarbons that we have available to us, all of the oil, all of the coal, all of the gas that we can find, and that we know that we can find, then we would send greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere rocketing to perhaps double those levels that we've already seen. And one of the issues here is that basically, you know, the companies that do this, they have a vested interest. They own these deposits, and they're worth money to them. So they're not going to just say, oh, okay, tell you what, I'll just leave all this stuff in the ground. So how do we deal with that conundrum? I'll come to you first, Natalie.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, you know, it's very obvious. In a way, 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is only 1 part per million more than 399. But it is, you know, we're humans. We regard symbolic milestones. People talk about big birthdays. And so 400 parts per million is really important as a symbolic milestone that we should never have gone past. It's like, you know, many of those stories that start, if you want to go there, you don't want to start from here. And we don't want to be starting from where we are, but we are where we are. And so that's why it's really important to actually, you know, develop the renewable energy, the low carbon sources of our future. And, you know, this is in terms of the energy bill that's now before Parliament. The part of many speeches where I get to say, and this isn't what I spend a lot of my time saying in other areas, I agree with the CBI. The Confederation of British Industry and the Green Party absolutely agree that we need to create what the magic phrase is decarbonisation by 2030, and that needs to be written into the energy bill so that there's certainty for energy companies to invest, because whilst I was talking about community energy, the immediate future does mean lots of energy companies investing in renewable energy. And we desperately need to create the future to do that now, to create the alternatives and start building them, if not tomorrow, the day after, because that's what we need to be doing.
And just to be clear, decarbonisation by 2030, that means that all the power that's generated in this country would be effectively zero carbon. So that would mean using renewables. It might mean using technology to capture and store carbon from, say, fossil fuel power plants. It might also involve nuclear, which you wouldn't like so much, but other people say that that's going to be needed.
Well, I think, I mean, one of the things I didn't mention in terms of nuclear was the sort of nuclear plant that they're talking about building in Hinkley in Somerset.
Yeah.
In Somerset. That's the last 2 of those that have been built, on average, took 14 years to build and 17 years to bring online onto the power system. So if we're looking to fill an energy gap coming up in a few years' time, nuclear is absolutely not the answer.
Okay, all right, thanks very much for that. Jim, what would you say to these issues, and can we leave this stuff in the ground to start with, and then, you know, what about the mixture of technologies we need?
We do need to leave a lot of it in the ground, there's no doubt about that at all. But we can't obviously stop using it immediately. It's so embedded in the way we run our lives and in many other countries too. But I think the technology you just mentioned, carbon capture and storage, is a prerequisite if we want significant amount of fossil fuels to be burned. I mean, even the cleanest, in quotes, of the fossil fuels, which is natural gas, it has less carbon than oil or coal, you can't burn a lot of it going into the 2020s in the UK, keeping within our climate targets, without using that technology. So that technology is really important. The problem with that technology is it doesn't exist at scale yet. And we in the UK, I think the UK government has agreed as long ago as 2006 that they want to demonstrate it, but we don't have a signed on the dotted line contract to do so yet. So
okay, so tell us why this amazing technology, which, you know, if it worked, it would sort of be the answer to all our problems, wouldn't it? Because it would, you know, you could have a coal-fired power plant or a gas-fired power plant, you'd have its chimney, you'd stick this wonderful technology on the end of the chimney, it would capture all of the carbon, and then you'd store it underground, perhaps in the sort of under the North Sea, where we've already extracted a lot of oil and gas, so we've got we know we've got space for it there. This sounds fantastic. You know, why aren't we doing it? Because I've been writing about this stuff for more than 10 years, and you know, it's been talked about as the next big thing for that entire time, and yet there still isn't a single power plant in the world using this technology. after 10 years of intense research.
Yeah.
What's going wrong?
And I've been writing about it for 10 years as well, and it's similarly, frustrating. I think that the bottom line, it's talked about as if it's just a big Lego kit. You take the bits, you capture the carbon, you build a pipeline, you stick it into an
That
oil
sounds
and gas
like one of the
field.
less popular Lego kits.
It is one of the less, amongst some, so in Germany it's a non-starter, in the Netherlands it's a non-starter. We can store it under the North Sea, so it's still a starter for us. But it's not a Lego kit in the sense that all the bits don't exist at scale or haven't been tried, and you have to put them all together. And that's a very, very expensive process. And I think in a time of austerity, it's amazing to me that the government still in principle in the UK has put £1 billion of our money aside to pay for these things, but that doesn't yet seem to be enough. There's still assurance that it will happen, and it needs to happen in many countries. But with the exception of North America, progress is really very slow and too slow. So in the absence of that technology, then even more pressure is put on this whole argument about leaving fossil fuels in the ground. And just to answer your basic point, you can't expect fossil fuel companies to do that and suddenly switch to doing something else, because it's what they know. Regulation is the only way at the national and international level.
There we go. No, great. We've got some very enthusiastic support for you there. Thanks very much. Okay, that sounds very good. Now, Vanessa, I think you're in favour of keeping this stuff in the ground, but if you're going to be in favour of keeping it in the ground, you've got to have an alternative. So I'm going to ask you about your alternative. And I'd also just like to bring in this question that we had earlier from Natalie of community support. Because if we're talking about, building wind farms, and we're talking about, local people having a stake in those wind farms, so, they get cash from it, maybe they get money off their energy bills, I know that's happening in some places, or they get, as you said, a new roof for the village hall or whatever. They get some benefits from having a wind farm. The government is talking about giving similar benefits, which could take the form of, just a dollop of cash, or, discounts on things or local amenities. Similar benefits to people who allow fracking to occur near them. That sort of community scheme, we're lots of people are in favour of it when it's wind farm. It's a bit more controversial when it's fracking. What do you think of that?
I think the clue's in the name. Fossil fuels, it's for the dinosaurs. We're done with it. It's time. I don't see shale gas as a bridging fuel. Of course, we can't immediately decommission everything. It cannot be the way forward with this. I also work with Polly Higgins on the Ecocide campaign, working to get Ecocide established as the 5th international crime against peace. No pressure. I have lost my thread there because there was something you asked particularly.
I was
about
talking
community
about
energy
community,
schemes.
yeah. So basically, if we're giving incentives to people to have wind farms or solar farms,
Yeah.
we're also going to give incentives for people to have fracking near them. Now, if I'm going to be persuaded to have a wind farm near me by that, wouldn't I be persuaded to have fracking near me by the same
Absolutely not. And they're not incentives, they're bribes. I have no compunction in saying that. They pay for a new roof on the village hall. Another thing Jessica Ernst said, she said, nobody asked me before they fracked my land whether I wanted light or water. Natalie spoke about energy efficiency. We can make such a difference with energy efficiency. We have such intelligence. We have such a resource of intelligence on this planet, of other technologies that would have been developed decades ago without the fossil fuel lobby. This whole thing of getting more and more fossil fuels out of the ground, it's been likened to an alcoholic sucking the last bits of wine out of a carpet, which is pretty unsavoury. But that's how it appears to me.
Thank you for that image, which I think is going to stay with us all. I think that's going to stay with us. Thank you for that. Okay, very strong feelings there. I'm going to open this out now to the audience, because I know that plenty of you have got comments you want to make or questions you want to ask. So if you've got a comment or a question, put your hand up, because we've got various hosts around who are going to assist you with microphones. I'm going to let our hosts do their work and start going to some of the people with their hands up. Yeah?
Would you like to indicate who we should go?
I think we have a lady here who I saw first, and then we've got some people over here. So what I'm going to do is, we've got quite a few, and a gentleman here. So what I'm going to do is, we've got a few questions all sort of coming at once. I'm going to take a few questions together, if that's okay, and put them to our panel. So if you'd like to start, madam, and can you keep comments or questions quite brief, because we've got a lot to get through.
Hello, thanks for your information. Is it true that China has introduced the death penalty for crimes against the environment?
That's a very interesting question. I certainly don't know.
I heard it on the news.
Oh, was it the BBC or Sky? Sorry, I'm going to get in trouble now. Yeah, okay. Thank you for that. I don't know the answer offhand. Perhaps one of our panellists might. Sarah.
Hi there. You've already touched on the fact that oil companies need to be regulated, and they're not, and that's because of power, and it's also because they create a social license to operate. And part of how they do that is through arts and culture establishments like the Southbank Centre. And I just wondered if this panel had any views on the fact that our public arts institutions and cultural institutions are supporting this, right from being in charge of fracking through the BP and Tate chair, Lord Brown, and the way that the whole arts and culture complex has been hijacked by big oil.
That's right. Please, feel free to express yourselves. I'm going to read out a statement about that. I should mention for people who don't know that Lord Brown was the former chairman of BP, and he's now the chairman of Quadrilla, which is the fracking company. It's the only company that's at the moment fracking in the UK. And just in response to this, before we move on, I'll just read out the statement that I've been given about this, because this did come up. So in response to the question of Shell is a sponsor of Meltdown in particular, the statement is... Sorry, excuse me, of the Southbank Centre, of the Southbank Centre. As a charity, Southbank Centre relies on the significant support of individuals, trusts and corporate sponsors in order to help deliver its artistic programme. Southbank Centre's annual Meltdown Festival is not supported by Shell. Shell sponsors Southbank Centre's Classical International series, which enables Southbank Centre to bring the greatest international orchestras to London. And in response to just specifically about the Meltdown, Shell doesn't sponsor Meltdown, just Southbank Centre. Yoko Ono's role, I'll just read out a statement on that. The position of the Meltdown director is one of artistic freedom and a platform to express all views, including those of ecological concerns. So this is our opportunity to express our views on that. So thank you very much indeed, sir, for that question. That was very pertinent. Thank you for that. Okay, we've got a few more questions to get through, so I'm going to take a few more at once here. Hello.
Nick Greeley from No Hot Hair. I am, as Vanessa will surely tell you, I have Quadrilla as one of my clients, but I'm speaking here on a personal basis. And this would be for Natalie. Are you familiar that the natural gas resources of the United Kingdom are one of the great communitarian resources that we have because they belong to us? And 60% of the cost of oil and natural gas in the United Kingdom is going to go directly to the UK taxpayer. And then finally, just to Vanessa, I would just say that one of the things about local energy is that it's our energy, and I think lots of people were thinking that local would only be renewable. But we are still going to need the lights on, and I assume you took a train or a car to get here, so you're going to use oil. So why displace the negative aspects of oil and gas to the Niger Delta, to the Arctic, and all these places, when we should really be accessing them here in the UK, well regulated, and with the economic benefits to the United Kingdom's people? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. And we had, while we're in the area, we'll take this gentleman here. Please.
There's a small person immediately behind me, and I think one of the questions that has to override all political decisions is who owns the future?
Thank you very much indeed. That's an excellent question. And while we're over here, we've got two questions here, which I'll take them both together so we can get a lot more, because I know we've got a lot more to take. Don't worry, we will get to you. So if we take these two here. Hello.
Hi. You may be aware at the moment that National Grid has to pay wind generators to turn off essentially when it's too windy, and that energy is not required. So do you think more work has to be done to more research into how we can store energy from renewable sources, so actually we can use it when we need it?
Yeah. Okay. Energy storage is one of those holy grails, like carbon capture and storage that we talked about earlier. Yep.
Yeah, this is on a sort of personal level, but I imagine it's relevant to everyone in the audience if they have a gas boiler, which we all seem to be dependent on. I've seen quite a bit of material about ground source heat pumps and air source heat pumps, which at the moment are relatively expensive and difficult to install because you have to dig up your garden to derive the relative difference in temperature from the ground. But I'm surprised none of you have talked about this, because on the surface it seems to be a free source of energy, though you have to pay for a pump to pump the fluid around. But maybe you could clarify that, please.
Lovely. Well, I'll take that question as it's a little bit technical, and so is the previous one about energy storage. I'm going to give them both to you, Jim, because as our sort of academic expert in the panel. So this question of ground source heat pumps, air source heat pumps, why aren't we using them? And then energy storage. So, you know, if we've got too much renewable energy on the grid at any one time, why can't we store it and then use it when we need it? I'll take the other questions to the others in a moment.
Okay, yeah, on heat pumps, they are available. Some people are starting to install them. Now they are relatively expensive. I mean, they're basically linked into this idea that if we can go to a low-carbon electricity system, then you could use that electricity to do the low carbon to the other parts of the energy system, which we sometimes forget in this debate, which are very important. So we still need heat for heating homes, and we still need to get around, as I think one of the other questioners alluded to, and transport. They're available now. They are, as you said, expensive, and they do need energy to operate. So it's not like it's entirely free. You have to use electricity to drive the heat pump. But the basic idea is you put in a bit of electricity and you get a lot more heat out if your temperature difference is good. Government's fairly enthusiastic about these, but I think a lot has to be done to get them deployed in a way that is cheap enough, that they operate effectively, and so on. And I think that's very much at that early stage, and getting users to operate them right. But absolutely, the upfront cost is a big barrier. And that's why I sort of agree with the points made earlier that reducing energy demand in the first place is the first thing you should do, and then move to things which actually give you supply of energy at with less emissions. On the national grid point, yes, absolutely, energy storage is required. It's part of that future. If we have more renewables on the system, we are going to have a more complicated electricity system. That could be an issue for energy security if not done right. But I think the potential of storage plus information and communication technology, the topic of the next debate in this series today, if that can be applied to energy, then it can really open things up. Again, the storage technologies exist, but they're not cheap enough yet, but more has to be done on those. Just briefly on, somebody asked about China and the death penalty, where I've worked in China quite a lot. I mean, there have been very strong sanctions against officials who allow pollution in their areas for quite a long time in China. I haven't heard about the death penalty one. I wouldn't necessarily at all condone that myself, but just to say that in some areas of China, actually allowing pollution incidents to happen, particularly in some of the more affluent areas of China, carries fairly severe penalties these days in a way that it didn't used to, because of public pressure and because of the problems have got so bad.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed for that. And I'm going to give Natalie and Vanessa a chance to answer. We had two questions really about the ownership here. We had this question. We've got a very young participant over there who's very interested in energy. It's great to see someone so young joining in the debate. But we had the question of who owns the future, and we had this parallel question from the gentleman here, which is we own the gas, the natural gas that's under the ground. This is a resource for the UK taxpayer, so shouldn't we all be able to I suppose, cash in, you could say, to paraphrase, on this? I'm going to give that one to you first, Vanessa.
Are hydrocarbons not owned by the Crown? there's a lot of discussion about the laws around this and whether there's a kind of requisition situation whereby if shale gas is found under your allotment, it can be extracted whether you want it to or not. The debate is still open on that. The fact remains that in a year and a half, I have not seen one single benefit potential to any community or even to any individual here. Once you put the environmental cost and the damage to human health into the equation, the economics change completely. There was a mention of Lord Brown. He's not only the director of, well, he is the director of Cuddrell, I believe he's the chairman now, ex-chairman of BP. He was appointed to the Cabinet Office Board as lead non-executive director advisor by Francis Maude, who is the MP for Balcombe, in June 2010. In July 2010, Cuddrell did a test frack in Kent. I wrote to Francis Maude, he insists there is no conflict of interest. What's going on? Something is really, really, really wrong here. I can't, as you know, Nick, I can't take your questions seriously. Your questions have already been answered. You're paid by the shale gas industry. Really, the questions have been answered. The argument is long since won, and you know it. And shame on you, frankly.
Thank you very much. We have an answer there. Nick, I'm sure you can explain yourself afterwards. I should explain that Nick and Vanessa have crossed swords many times in many other forums, and I'm sure you can imagine it's always a great debate. Thank you very much. Thanks for that. Who owns the future, Natalie, and who owns the shale gas?
Okay, well, in terms of who owns the future, I think the Green Party policies have probably since the very start of the Green Party, going back to when we were the Ecology Party, we've talked about intergenerational justice. And I think the way I interpret that, the way I try and put that in ordinary language, in the way I think about it, is that I'd like to think that when I've lying on my deathbed, whenever that might be, that I can think I did a bit to try and leave the world a bit better than I found it. And there is no doubt at all that at the moment we are trashing the planet. It's not just the energy issue that we're talking about today. Here in Britain, we're living, using up the resources overall as though we had 3 planets. Whatever your personal lifestyle is, collectively on average, once you've got 4 months through the year, you've used up 1 planet's worth of resources for the year. And we simply can't keep doing that, because what we're doing is robbing those resources from the next generation and the generations after that. And that's something that we just can't keep doing. And that's energy, but it's lots of other issues as well. I did just want to pick up in terms of what Nick said, because I think there's an important issue that we haven't really raised yet, which is this talk of gas being, of fracked gas being cheap. Now, the reality was in the US, when they first started fracking, the US wasn't connected to the global gas supply system. So you suddenly had a whole new supply of stuff, and unsurprisingly, coming into a closed system, and unsurprisingly, the price dropped down. But the UK is connected to the global gas system. We have pipelines, we have boats coming in and out. And it will not be cheap gas, because the gas, if we do frack in Britain, will come out of the ground and it will be the global price. And the International Energy Agency, its best prediction is that the price of gas will double in the next decade. So there is no such thing as cheap gas. Let's absolutely knock that one on the head.
Thank you.
Could I add one point, Fiona?
Thank you very much for that.
Fiona, could
Sorry.
I over here?
Sorry, I thought I heard a question from the audience. Excuse me.
Just this oft-repeated thing about keeping the lights on. How about we turn them off occasionally?
Well said.
Very good. Thank you very much for that. Right, we did have some more questions from the audience, and we're going to have to take them very quickly, because we've not got a huge amount of time. We've got an awful lot of people we want to hear from. Hosts, could we have? We had a question here, and there's one here and here. If we could get those, and host over here, if you'd like to get ready. Yeah.
There just seems to be so many battles to deal with on so many fronts. But if you were to take like one issue, the main one seems to be either to focus on monitoring the government or motivating the people to engage more. how can we progress that level? Because the government doesn't seem to be taking on, but how can you awaken the sensibilities in the people to
Well, we've got two fantastic campaigners here who I think can give us some tips on that. Thank you, and I think we've got some more questions up here if we could get ready. I think there's a lady here who's ready to...
So we heard this week that the climate change is possibly, or the climate is changing possibly due to the melting of the ice in the Arctic. So what I'm interested in, especially based on this discussion, what can be done during the life of this and next government that can change this trend, apart from, I think, highly unpopular solution of putting another jumper on, or cycling to work, etc., etc. So, or is that the only solution? So if it is, then let's start talking about it.
Some jumpers are very nice. I think we had some other questions up here, host, if you could take up there. And I think there's someone ready here, is that right? Yep. If we could hear from you, please.
My question is for Vanessa. With, as I understand it, recent legislation allowing fracking to now go ahead in the UK, what's the future and the nature of fracking protests you and other people going to take? What kind of ideas do you have for taking that forward?
Brilliant, thank you very much. I think that relates very much to our grassroots question here. We have a gentleman here, and if we can take this question here. Sorry, sir, I'm going to take you in a second. We've got a lady ready here.
Hi. Regarding representation of all views, I think that there is a guest missing from the panel. That would be someone that is professionally involved in energy generation.
Okay, well, we probably did ask Lord Brown, but I don't know, maybe he was washing his hair. I don't know. That's a good point.
There are lots of energy companies out there. I don't know how we don't have an engineer in the panel, or someone with a little bit of more of a pragmatic view on the issue.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for that point there. Thank you.
So my question follows on from the question, what else can we do apart from encouraging people to wear more jumpers?
Yep.
And what else can be done to accelerate the development and deployment of technologies, alternative technologies, such as the carbon capture, which has been around for quite a while, such as improved solar power using graphene paint and so forth. What needs to be done to get more of society's resources actually researching and developing these? Is it that the government must take the lead, investing more aggressively? Is it that it's to be left to private enterprise? Or is there a role in government in setting subsidies and regulations to change how the market operates?
That's a very good question. Thank you very much. And I'm going to direct that at Professor Watson in a second. I'm going to give these questions to our panelists now, but if there's any more comments or questions, you've got one last chance. Better put your hand up right now. Can we get the microphone here? And this is going to be our last. Question or comment, sir?
Since this is the last comment, could we now dim the audience lights, please?
Okay. Somewhere outside this building there is a little wind turbine, but I'm not sure that our lights are operating from it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Right. Panel, I'm going to take you first, Jim, on this interesting question of technology and why aren't we, who needs to do this R&D? Is it private sector or government? And why aren't we going fast enough? Quite briefly, we've only a few minutes. So,
yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, it's a partnership. The idea that, the private sector is going to just bring all this on, which you often hear, particularly in US debates, without any framework or incentives from government is wrong. But at the same time, government can't do it all either. I mean, government have a particular role in funding research because private companies won't do that. There are really good arguments why they won't. But I think the key, going back to one of the points I made earlier, is taking those technologies we know about, which are not yet cheap enough, they're not commercialized, and finding ways to support them. And I think their government policy has to be patient, and that's very hard for governments. They change incentives all the time. For example, the feed-in tariffs, which were helping people put solar panels on their roofs and actually helping them to sign up to this whole low-carbon project by giving them a direct benefit, alluding to what Natalie said earlier. So government has to do more, but it's not just about research, people in white coats, it's actually commercializing and demonstrating the technologies. And it's not just about wearing jumpers and cycling. There's a lot of technological things, but I think behavior has to be part of it as well.
Thank you very much. Vanessa, excuse me, Natalie, I'm going to take Vanessa in a moment on this question of the future of fracking protest and the grassroots movement. But before that, I'm going to ask Natalie, we had this question about, that was, I think, directed at you, which was about, we're asking people to change their behaviour, asking people to put on more jumpers and so on. It's a bit unpalatable. How are we going to do that?
Well, I think we've done quite a lot of jumpers, so I'm going to focus on the cycling side of this. The fact is, actually, we can't, we've actually gone past peak car. People are using cars less. And there's lots of reasons for that. Some of them are economic, but some of them are also because we've got huge congestion on our roads. We've got no more places to put roads. And we also have, if you think about what the impact of a car-driven society is, we have a huge obesity problem. We have a childhood obesity problem. People won't let their children walk to school because they think the roads are too dangerous. There's lots and lots of reasons how we can create a better society that involve using less fossil fuels, that involve using less energy. We can actually make our roads nice places to be. They were once. Mm-hmm. Kids used to play in the street. There's new play schemes starting where they close suburban residential streets and the kids come out and play and the neighbours all chat to each other, and it's really nice. So rather than focusing on, gosh, we won't be able to do all these things anymore, let's think about how, by reducing energy use, we can actually make our society a nicer place to be, a more pleasant place to live. And there's lots we can do with energy conservation for that. And in terms of the question, I'm just very briefly going to tackle the whole democracy issue. I was at the People's Assembly, 4,500 people in central London yesterday talking about this issue of democracy. Now, I'm sure I mentioned the decarbonisation by 2030, and it's not too late to write that into the energy bill because it's going to the House of Lords. So your favourite Lord, whoever it is that that you happen to chat with over the fence on a regular basis, or if you don't, look them up on the internet, write to your favourite Lord and say, put decarbonisation by 2030 in the energy bill, because that's the single thing we can do today to make things better.
Thank you very much. I'm sure everyone here has a favourite Lord that they can do that with. Thank you. And finally, Vanessa, we had these questions of, what's the future of fracking protest, and what can you tell us? What's the kind of one major thing that you would tell us about doing grassroots campaigning? Because we're running out of time, so it's got to be quick. So punchy.
Not petitions, unless it's something like 38 degrees or a vase behind it, and that's happening soon. I've learnt that doesn't work. You can write to MPs, you can lobby, you can do all sorts of things. I took a deputation to Downing Street, a UK-wide one, it was ignored. What it needs is individual people to take initiatives and to network. Social media is hugely powerful. The revolution is not televised, it is being Facebooked, it is being tweeted. So yeah, Britain and Ireland frack free, biff, frack off, whatever the groups you want to hook up with. Whether you hold a tea party on a rig site, the Lock the Gate movement, I will mention, is possibly the most powerful thing that is working in Australia, and 3 mining companies have now pulled out because residents and communities have declared peacefully, not with any legal standing, that these companies have neither social nor moral licence to frack their land, to pollute their water, to pollute their air. So each road has signed up a declaration, and then they did a ceremony and they handed it down the line, and the child at the end of the line handed it to the mayor. And the company pulled out. Now, one of those companies is now in Scotland, and they've already dumped in the Firth of Forth. Quadrilla has already dumped toxic, radioactive, supposedly treated waste in the Manchester Ship Canal with Environment Agency sanction. Write to the Environment Agency, hit the streets. Some people are prepared to lock themselves to rigs. That's personally not what my path is. I don't know. The point is I don't know. I've just thrown myself into this, and I'm asking, we're all asking. This isn't a hierarchical structure. Everybody take initiatives, and if you've got any ideas, send a message to Biff. I can help network it, but really, we've all got to do this. This isn't one organisation who can do anything. The government's not listening.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I think that's a very appropriate note to end on, giving that we're here at the Meltdown Festival and giving Yoko Ono's own personal history of very effective protesting of one kind or another. Thank you very much to our panellists. Of course, the next session, as I said, is the future of the web. So please do stick around for that and many of the other things that we've got going on for the rest of the weekend. I'd just like to say thank you to all of you for coming and for engaging so passionately in this debate. and thank you to our wonderful panellists. Thank you.